Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gareth Boyle. I'm the Senior Marketing Executive for Fusion 5, and welcome to the second of our manufacturing-focused live Q&As for this year. Joining us today, we have our ERP Director, Craig Westcott, Senior F&O Consultant, Tom Veach, and our Industry Director for Manufacturing, Paul Hutchings. We will have our presenters up first today, followed by a short Q&A session. If you just look at the top right-hand corner of your browser or the chat function of your Teams application, please feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentations and as they arise, and we'll address them towards the end of the event. We'll also be sharing a recording of the session and a brief summary of the Q&A with you as well. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our Director, Craig Westcott. Craig.
Thanks, Gareth. Hi, I'm Craig Westcott. I look after the ERP area of our business at Fusion 5. Now, thank you for attending. It's great to have you guys with us today. So I've been in ERP for about 20 years, just as a brief introduction, and I've worked across a number of areas. I'm focused very much in the Microsoft space, which is where we're, focusing today, that area. Just to introduce the people who will be talking today, we've got Paul Hutchings, who's our Industry Director of Manufacturing. So Paul's been deep in manufacturing for many, many years, and specifically around F&O and D365. So he's going to cover that. And then Paul Veach is, Tom Veach is one of our supply chain leads, really, and talk about warehousing and a lot of the challenges around managing supply chain. So Paul and Tom will be, I'll be introducing those guys to cover off their sections. Just to touch a little bit on Fusion 5, we're about 470 people. We're across ANZ. We do a lot of work in the business application space, helping customers solve problems in this area. We've got a big Microsoft practice. Probably about a third of our business is focused on Microsoft, which is the technology we're talking about today. And it's across ANZ. So really big focus for us, this area, and an exciting growth area. Finally, just to touch on the agenda today, we're going to cover off process and discrete manufacturing. So Paul's going to talk about different elements of both of those areas. And then we're going to move into talking deeper into Power Apps and where you can use Power Apps, because obviously it's such an important area for Microsoft. It's such a big growth area and fills a lot of gaps. Then we'll move on to talking a bit about scanning. That's come up as an important area that a lot of customers want to talk about, because you can use that to improve processes within your warehouse and through the supply chain. And then touching on moving into shop floor, time entry, and probably wrap it up at that, actually. So I'm not going to take up much more time because I'm not the one with all the knowledge in my head around this. So I'm going to hand over to Paul. So have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Craig. Just confirm you can see the opening slide, please, Gareth.
Can see it there, Paul. Cheers.
Fantastic. Okay, welcome everyone. So today's session is more targeted around the discrete manufacturing. We did the process manufacturing on the last session. The recording is available if anyone wants to go back and ever have a look at it. But as I go through this, I will be pointing out the differences between the discrete and the process. Okay, so slide. Okay, so what we've got here is what the difference between discrete manufacturing is, what's the challenges of discrete manufacturing, F&O capabilities, and then we're going to get into some demos and Q&As. So Microsoft World consists of a number of elements, and as you can see here, we've got sales and marketing and talent for people. In the products, we've got operation and finance, which is your F&O, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Okay, so inside the F&O, we've got the product design, the planning, the manufacturing, logistics, financial management, and project management. Okay, here's a breakdown of the modules that it consists of in each of those areas. And a further breakdown of that of what it actually all disseminates into. And then we've also got the, we're touching on this, which is the evergreen applications, which is effectively the add-ons, the bolt-ons that go straight into D365. So that's embedded Power BI apps, embedded Power BI, Microsoft Flow, and custom fields. So custom fields don't need a developer anymore to actually put in. You only need a developer if you want to use it you want to add it to a form or something like that. Okay, so discrete manufacturing. The difference here between discrete and process is that with process, you're working in batches. With discrete, you're usually working on a batch size of 1. We tend to use BOMs instead of formulas. The routes are pretty much the same, but most discrete manufacturers usually have a multi-operation routes, where a process manufacturer tends to have only 1 or 2. Okay, we can require a multi-step or linear or parallel operations, and for the process of the routes in a discrete manufacturing environment. So, example, you may have 2 molding machines molding components, and then a third machine that puts them together. So they need to run in parallel, so both end items arrive at the same time. Okay, then we got quality management. We still have quality management even in discrete. Integrated tracking of raw materials, WIP, and finished goods. Now, in process, WIP is not such a big deal because most of their processes work in a very short lifespan, so there isn't actually that much WIP involved. And then we got the multi-dimensional products. So this is where we introduce variants, where you can have size, color, or configuration. There's a couple of extensions to that, which I'll come to later. Okay, so achieving a balance is essential here. So we need to take into account the customer engagement, empowerment of employees via the system, optimize of operation, and the transformation of products. Okay, so we're going to concentrate on the optimization of operations through this set. Okay, discrete manufacturing. Okay, so F&O capabilities. So we've got a thing called step consumption, which is for non-linear input. So what that means is that you may have a product that you're producing, and regardless of the size you're producing, you may have a component, some sort of startup component. So if we're talking molding machines, for instance, you may have what's left in the skewers that you need to run through the pipes first. Then we've got configurable products. So that is a product configurator built inside the system, which gives us the basic options of features and options. Now it's all constraint based, and we go through that as well. And we have product variants. Now we do actually have 5 product dimensions these days. Where we originally had size, color, style, and configuration, we've now got version as well. That's with the introduction of engineer change. Then we've got BOM, multi-level BOMs, single level BOMs, and then we've also got the engineer change as well. Okay, so the step consumption works on a BOM or a formula, and effectively we have another section called step consumption. Once you go and check that formula or BOM type to step, you then have the ability to put in the quantity that you require per quantity. So if you had a barrel of material, say you were mixing some sort of chemical and it required some sort of stabilizer, and you say you only needed 2 grams of stabilizer in, regardless of the batch size, you could actually set that up here. So instead of setting up as consistent, you could actually step it depending on the size that you wanted to produce. My mouse now. Here we go. Okay, configurable products. Okay, so configurable products is probably one of the most underutilized sections inside of AX. It used to be a product builder. They moved it to a product configurator, so it now requires no coding. So normal people could do it. We don't actually need a developer. You actually build your configuration model. It's all based on constraints. And as you can see on the side there, we've got a selection. So when I go and test it, I've got high-end speaker. And at this stage here, I can choose the cabinet finish, the grill finish, the corner protection, and the speaker height. Now, the cabinet finish, depending on what I select, will automatically restrict what grills I can do. If I'm using a metal, it will automatically pull in the corner protection, for instance. And the speaker height is a selection of 6 different options for the speaker height. Now, if I went on to the next one, it could also ask how long I want the leads, and that is a numerical character. And after you go and create this, you can then get the price. So it will automatically calculate the price, and it'll also run a mini MRP and calculate the ship depending on the setup that you've actually got. So it's actually very handy for a product that has features and options. I have done really complicated ones. We did a garage door at one stage where, depending on the grading of the door, it would use more or less steel. we had panels that were a fixed size, so we would automatically allocate full panels, even if they only required 10 millimeters of it. We'd just have to allocate a whole sheet, because the reality is that's what you actually had to do. Product variants. So inside your system there, you can have a product. So you actually name this product. We've got a global product and a release product per company. And then underneath that product, you can actually then state variants. And if you look on the side here, I can see from here that I've got 3 variances on this. And if I just flick over to the variant screen, you actually see that each variant has its own description, and we can actually generate their own descriptions. We can see that on hand stock. We can also have external item numbers per variant. We've also got a product lifecycle status per variant. So if you had 5 different variants and one of them was going to be superseded, you could actually update the product lifecycle just for the variant, instead of the old days where you had to kind of replace the product. Okay, they're very easy to create. Once you create them, you could then use the engineer change to actually authorize that creation, and then you could turn around and release it to as many companies as you want. You may only want to release a particular color variant to one particular country, for instance, so one legal entity. That's all taken care of inside the system. Production type. So bill of materials, a typical production type for a discrete manufacturer is we have an end item, which is made up of a part and a subassembly. That subassembly in turn may be made up of a part and another subassembly, and that final subassembly may be made up of 2 parts. Now there's an operation for each part. Now this can all be done in a single structure. This is BOM Designer. So this is a graphical view of what your actual BOM looks like, and I've expanded as many of the panels as I can to fit it onto a screen. But effectively you have the level 0 item number. You then have a level 1 item number. Now in here we've got all the materials that go into it, and this here is a subcomponent that actually goes into it. And down the bottom here we have all the operations that we require to actually make this. And as you can see, I've got primary and I've got secondary. So secondary operations are usually used for a labor component, if it's a machine operated process that you're running. You can also introduce tools. So you may have a molding machine that requires a tool and an insert to actually run through. When you've got that tool allocated in here, you set it up as a secondary operation. That tool then becomes unavailable for the life cycle of that operation, which means that way there you don't end up trying to schedule 2 products that require the same tool but different inserts. Okay, engineer change. Now this is brand new. It's only just being released. In fact, I think it's officially being released in February. And effectively what it does now is it gives you a new section here where you can actually do an engineer change for the product. So when you go and select an engineer change for the product, you can then choose a new product, and you can replace the old product with the new product, and it will actually run through a complete workflow. You also have engineering attributes that you can associate to a product, and it takes those into account as well. And when you go and release it, it will give you a warning that your attributes are changing and ask somebody to authorize it. We also have electronic signatures. So if you want to strongly restrict who can do what, at the end of it, once you go and do it and you want to approve it, it will actually require you to do an electronic signature. Okay, so once you go and create your new item and you decide you want to replace the same, it actually creates a change order. This is where all the smarts of it is, and it will actually give you a history. It's a full tracking, so you can tell exactly when it got changed, why it got changed, and you can attach a whole lot of notes on it explaining the reasons behind it as well. Okay. The other things we have here is we have a dashboard for validating specific predefined product related data. Then we're going to go into routes and operations, resource capabilities. Now, resource capabilities, where in the old days where you used to assign a work center to a job, you can now assign capabilities to different resources, whether they're work centers or humans. You can also give them priorities and orders and skill levels that they require to actually run these. They then get connected to the routes. Instead of putting in a work center, you just put in a capability and the system will automatically preload all your work centers. We've also got sequencing for production, and we've also got the total cost allocation, including the allocations of overheads. So the readiness dashboard is what you're seeing on the screen right now. And as you can see here, you've got tiles over here which actually tell you if stuff is missing versions or BOM versions or route versions or variants or whatever else it may be. It's also got a tab up here telling you there's product change requests. So this is the one that connects to your engineering. And down the side here, you've got a quick reference panel. So you can actually click into it and actually give you the numbers. And from here, you can check the completeness. And underneath these 3 dots, there's a whole lot of other tasks you can do, including going directly to the product. Down the side here, you've got a whole lot of predefined links, everything you'll possibly need to actually update the information for your particular products. So it keeps it all nice and tidy in one place. So instead of having to find your way through bulk menus. Routes and operations. So routes they're pretty much unchanged over the years. They keep on extending them a bit. And like I said, across the top here, you've got the multiple operations. And as you can see here, I've got a mix and heat. I've also got a mixing operator required. I've got dispensary. I've also got dispensary operator. Then I've got curing time. Then I've got trim and cut and the trim cut operator. So they're all plugged in there. You'll notice the run times for the secondary operation aren't there. It's because it is dictated from the primary operation. You can have up to 99 secondary operations. Never seen anyone get anywhere close to that yet, but that's what your options are. Across the top here, we've got a whole lot of extra things in there, including setup. So in the setup there, we can put in the setup time, queue time, transfer time. Now the transfer time is for parallel operations. So it says that when I'm doing a parallel operation, when I've started my first operation, how long before I can start my second operation? And so if I've got 2 parallel operations going in, I don't need to wait till they're both fully complete. I've just got to make sure that the end time of the secondary operations, sorry, the first operations is not exceeded the end time of the second operation. And so that's what this transfer quantity does. We've also got queue after time, so stuff that, you know, once it's been queued, it may need to sit for 5 or 6 hours before it can actually move to its next operation. Okay, so in here, this is your resource capabilities, and as you can see on the screenshot here, I've got an assembly one. And what I've got here, I've got all the resources, and these are workers. And these workers can actually have a assigned name, or actually you can just group them together and say, okay, we've got cabinet worker 1, 2, 3, and 4 with this skill level. Now down the bottom here, this is your skill level. It sits in there, and this is the priority. So if I were to set a priority, I always wanted to use cabinet worker 1 as a priority. I could set him as a priority 1, and this job could be completed by a cabinet assembly worker, but I may set him at 99. So he's going to be my final choice. It's really good, especially for running machines. If you have a couple of machines that do exactly the same thing, you can actually set up this priority. So a good example of that is one of the companies I went to, they had dryers, and they had 5 dryers, and they had particular products that would run better through different dryers, even though these dryers were theoretically identical. But because of where they actually sat in the plant, they could be affected by moisture levels. So they would prioritize certain products to go down certain lines in a certain priority. Down here is how you actually attach it to a route. So this is your route detail form that we saw before. The only difference here is that we've gone onto the resource requirement tab. And what I've gone and done in here is I said, for this job, I require an assembly and a speaker production. And down the bottom here, I've got the minimal level required skill level. So both of these are set at 0. So what it's looking for is it's looking for a resource that has got assembly and speaker qualifications to actually make. There's also a applicable resources there, which after you go and set it up, you hit it to make sure that you haven't put in too many restrictions and there's nobody physically available to actually do this job. So sequencing. So after master planning, most sequences end up looking like this because they are usually driven backwards from delivery date. And so you end up with a mix. Once you go and run the sequencing, and the sequencing for this particular group was color, then by packaging. So it looks at the color of the paint and then the packaging size of the paint. Now this particular example, I had quarts and gallons. And so what it would do is it would go lightest to darkest by color. And then with inside the lightest to darkest combinations, it would then resort by the packaging size. So you ended up going from that to something that resembles more like this. Okay, food manufacturing. we can do exactly the same thing, you know, based on allergens, for instance. You know, you want to do all your gluten-free stuff first and then switch over to stuff that contains gluten. That way it restricts your clean down. As soon as you switch from gluten product back to gluten-free, you've got to do a complete wash down. Total cost. So there's a thing called a costing sheet. And the costing sheet is a way of actually pre-setting up a whole lot of rules. So when you actually run your costing, instead of just adding up your time and materials, it can actually also incorporate overheads. So as you can see, this one here, level 0, I've got a final product. My final product has a unit cost of 89 cents a unit. That is based on a lot size of 446,654.75 is my lot size for this particular item. And as I go through it, all it's doing is it's rolling up the lower components. Now the lot size is important because of your setup. So if you've got setup and you're only making a batch 1 and you got 5 hours setup, it would immediately pick up 5 hours worth of setup time and apply that to the cost. So your batch size is quite important on this. But the reality is, if you're making 1 and you've got 5 setups you have to do to make 1, the reality is that's actually what it's going to cost you. Now down the bottom there, we've got unit based. For depreciation on machines, we've also chucked in there a surcharge. The surcharge is usually to do with quality. This particular one is actually surcharged in US dollars. And then we've got an output quantity, which is quantity-based unit. Now this used to be called the old-fashioned carrying cost. So that's to make up for all the logistics of carrying it, expiry, all that type of stuff comes into it. So the costing sheet itself, when you actually go and look at it, so if I went and hit that tab there, it actually breaks down to here. And what it will do is it will now sort it by cost groups. So if I was looking at this and saying, well, the product's too high, the price is too high, I need to take out some cost. Immediately it tells me what area to concentrate on. So when you go and look at this, you know, sometimes it's purchase items, sometimes it's labor, whatever the cost may be, but it's a very quick way of concentrating on it because there's no worse than spending hours trying to negotiate a material and get 5 cents off a material and then find out that 95 cents of it was labor costs. So maybe you should be looking at the way you're processing it. So this is what the costing sheet looks like. And this one, just go back one. So this one here is a pretty basic costing sheet, believe it or not. And as you can see there, I've got cost of purchase up the top here. So according to the cost of purchase on this particular one here, I've actually got cost of purchase and I've also got an overhead, which is my transport overhead because I'm not getting free in store. So by breaking products into a costing group, I can now apply this cost of purchase, which is a percentage of the cost I'm actually adding onto this. And I would have a category in there called imported goods, or I could really go the whole hog and go imported from Europe, imported from China, imported from Asia, wherever it may be, and have a different cost overhead. So what it's doing is it's actually adding cost onto your purchase price. So you calculate your cost, it would take your purchase price plus the overhead, which will give you your cost. Now, as we go down here, I've now got a cost of conversion where I've got my cost of materials, my cost of labor, and then I get down here and I get into my overheads, which I've gone and applied. Now, when you go and do your overheads, your options here are you can do it by surcharge, a rate, input-based quantity, or an output-based quantity. Now, a lot of people these days with quality are actually putting a output-based quantity. So they put, 1 cent a unit for quality checking on every single item they produce, for instance, and include that as part of their total costs. Okay, you can actually get quite flash with these sheets. I actually worked with a company that had a costing sheet and it had about 600 lines in total. And that was because they were incorporating duty as well as freight. And the particular product they were doing, they worked in a clothing line, an industrial clothing line, and they had to pay duty on men's uniforms and no duty on women's uniforms. So there's all that sort of stuff is all built into it. So once a year, they would recalculate their costs. It used to take them about a month and a half to do that. Once we introduced the costing sheets, it took a fair while to set up. But once we did it, they basically knew what their costs were by the end of the day. Quality. Okay, not quite sure that quality slide is in there, but okay then. So discrete manufacturing and process manufacturing both use master planning, scheduling. I'm going to go through the Gantt charts, the capabilities, and the shop floor device. The shop floor device is something that is relatively new, and it's quite handy to do, especially if you've got tablets. And the price of tablets these days is so cheap, more and more people are actually going to this to get live information. Okay, so master planning settings. Key areas here, we can actually consider shelf life. We can also consider quotations. Now, if we could tick that box there on and put in a probability, when you're doing quotations, if your probability goes over a certain amount, it would actually take your quotation and plan to purchase the materials and plan to do the job. Now, during the master planning, you've got an option here to go operation scheduling, or which is rough cut capacity, or job scheduling, which is a finite capacity. You could also then define how far out you want your finite capacity to actually go. Right? We can also consider supply forecast and demand forecast. The supply forecast is a forecast of your raw materials. So some plastic industries that I work with, they make so many end items, they don't even try and forecast the end items. What they do is they try and forecast their material, because as long as they've got the material, they can make whatever you want. Demand forecast is purely based on your demand, which is just your standard sales forecasting. Now, inside your time fences here, we've also got a time fence where we can set on sequencing, because you may run your master plan out for a year. You don't want to sequence for a whole year, so you can actually restrict how far you actually sequence out. And then down the bottom here, you got your standard ones. So ensure that all planned orders are before today are not included. So effectively, anything that is planned before today will now automatically by default go to today, which then means that the master planning will go backwards from delivery date as its first run. As soon as it hits today's date, it will turn around and go forward from today's date and recalculate it. These boxes down here is telling the system to consider all the constraints. So it will actually give you proposed orders based on what the system rules are. So again, working on pure theory of constraints. Okay, scheduling. So scheduling, again, it's one of the most unutilized things inside of most ERP systems, to be quite honest with you. There are some scheduling tools out there, but job scheduling here, if you have a look at your options here, it does cover most of the options you would ever use. You can also include finite material or finite capacity. You've also got finite properties. So on your bill of materials, you can actually put different properties, and they will be taken into account when you're doing your planning as well. But there again, most planners will plan backwards from delivery date to begin with, and then they will grab hold of a block of work and they will schedule forward from a scheduling date. The scheduling date is usually at the end of when their current schedule is due to expire. But we have got things here like plan backwards from action date. Now, one of the issues when you're using multiple bombs and multiple routes is that you want to make sure that your operations from level 4 all the way up to level 1 coincide with each other. Now, the standard system will automatically have a look and it will plan everything based on the finish date. But there's a little function in there called backwards from action date. Now, if you've got your action messages turned on and you reschedule your finished product, it will automatically reschedule all your lower end products based on that date, not the actual desired date of the finished item. Okay, so there again, you got a whole lot of cancellations you can apply. And when the parameters here, we've got a parameter here for sorting. Now, when you go and sort, there's a number of sorts you can do. There's a thing called a priority. You can also sort by ascending and descending. And basically, it takes this block of work and resorts it and only uses a delivery date after it's followed its first sorting rule. Now, we're actually working on IP at the moment. It's in beta, where we're actually using the bill of materials to calculate the offensivity of materials. And that way, we're actually grouping offensive materials together to reduce setups and clean downs. Okay, then.
Sorry, Paul, are you able to zoom in at all very easily there?
No.
That's right. I'll share. We just had a question there. I'll be sure to share that slide with the group after the session today, guys. Cheers.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so scheduling. So once I've gone and done my scheduling, just by changing the view, and as you can see up here, we've now got the option to actually save views and give them names, and it's called My View. And what I've gone and done here is I've gone and taken a machine line, which happens to be line free, and I'm showing the scheduled version. I've also gone and brought forward to this front screen the start date, the end, start date, start time, end date, end time, and the delivery date. So very quickly, when I'm looking at my schedule, I can look at the sequencing of it. This is the order that it needs to be produced, and I can print this out and present it on the floor. Okay, because what a lot of people don't realize is that once you schedule, the delivery date is now inconsequential because it has absolutely no bearing on anything unless I actually reschedule. Okay, so another way I can look at it is I can actually look at it by operation. So if I had multiple operations under it and I had operations going to different machines, I can still filter by the line 3, but it would now show me all the operations that relate to that line 3. That may be across multiple different resources. This one it isn't, but it possibly could be. Now this again gives me the start date, start time, end date, end time, and it also gives me the status of the order that it's the ones that are coming up. So as you can see, if it's got coming, it means it's not ready yet. The little box there, material consumption, that will tell me what operations actually require more materials to be issued at this point in time. So there's multiple views we can actually use to actually present it to the floor, so they can actually use it to produce against. Now we've also got the Gantt chart view. So the Gantt chart view here, as you can actually see, it's for running multiple operations, and you can see the operations against that machine. There's also a little red line that when you're running it, that little red line moves live. So if we're reporting live information, this table also gets updated as well. So you can actually see exactly where you are at any one point in time. From this, you can also do a number of operations, which I have exploded this time, so that should be easier to see. So down the bottom right-hand corner, you can actually see by right-clicking on any of the operations, I can schedule from material availability, previous job, next job, around job. So around job, what that means, if I go and lock a job in position and it had 5 or 6 other operations around it, when I hit around job, it will schedule all the other operations based on where I've situated that particular operation. Okay, and we can also tap in and see the capacity load to make sure that we're not trying to overlay something that we possibly can't do. So the Gantt chart now has a fair bit of functionality, where before it was like a picture that wasn't really very useful. I can also collapse it up and have a single line. The information on that single line isn't overly good, but it does give you an idea of where your gaps are. Enter your capability. So this is how we apply capability. So I've got this capability here. I've actually got priority this time against the workers. And when I go and set my resources against my route, in here I can actually set the minimum level of skill level that I require, and then it will automatically take the skill level and then look for the priority. The highest priority will be the one that I want to select first, providing it's got capacity. So it is looking at capacity of these resources all the time. When I hit applicable resources, as you can see, according to the 2 rules I've set here, there is only 2 operators that could possibly do this job. So that's what I was talking about before about the applicable resources. So shop floor device, you actually go into all you need is a web address. It's actually built into D365 FinOps itself. It will ask you for a badge ID or ask you into your personnel ID, otherwise you can actually scan. So if you've got something on you that you can actually scan, that would automatically log you in. Once you log in, it brings up all your jobs. Now it brings up the job that you should be doing next. There's a button there called assigned, and that will show you all your jobs. There's another button there called filter, and you can actually filter by the resource that you're actually working on. So it only shows you the resource that you're working on's jobs. From here, you can start the job. You can also bring up instructions, or you can go forward and backwards from jobs, depending on settings. Some people like to set it so the operator only sees the job they have to work on. Now, during this, they can also record breaks. And underneath the hood, what it does is it's capturing the elapsed time, and it will then produce a route card with the times based on what the elapsed time is. Now, the great thing I like about this is that you can also record all the indirects. So when you're stopping a job and it's not for a break, including breakdowns and all that type of stuff. So later on, you can run a report and see how many indirect activities were performed against a particular resource, which will now give you some documented proof that, you know, this machine needs a major overhaul or a brand new machine. Once you've got those hours, you could then justify the cost. So again, when I go and click into it, I open up this job, it brings up instructions, I hit the instructions, it opens up all the attachments, and I can have more than one, and it will give me a preview down the bottom here. I can then choose to actually hit the open button, and it will bring that preview into a full screen. So as you can see, this particular set of instructions here, this is page 4 of 23. So it's a fair bit of instructions on that, so they probably want to open it up. Again, as long as they've got a tablet, that's all they need was a tablet with a web address, and they can open up all this. When I go and start the job, what it'll actually do is that as soon as I start the job, if I've got a particular setting on, it will now bring up a pick list journal for me. It will open up the pick list journal and tell me what my consumption should be, so I can actually now manually type in the actual consumption that I'm actually putting into the machine. Or if we go to advanced warehousing, you can actually scan the materials that you require. Okay, quality tests. Okay, so under the quality tests here, we can associate test instruments, different tests that we need to perform against a particular item, and we can also trigger those tests. So if I just flick across here, according to this, we've got a thing here called quality association. So this is where it automatically creates a quality order. So as you can see here, I can do it through inventory. You probably can't see because I didn't explain it, but I've got inventory, sales, purchasing, production, quarantine, route operation, and co-product production. So any one of those type product reference types gets produced. I could then turn around and associate this. So if it's purchasing, directly to a customer. If it was inventory, I could associate it. Sorry, if it's production, I could associate it to an operation or a route or a resource. Now down the bottom here, when I go and create a quality order, it automatically creates, and it's going to, this particular one is based on purchasing. It's for all accounts, so it doesn't matter who I buy it from. The event type is on product receipt, and I'm going to generate the quality order after I do the product receipt. I have got event blocking down here, and usually with event blocking, I would have stopped the invoice. So I'm not actually going to pay the supplier until I actually pass the quality test, because I may want to return it. It's got a test group down here, and the test group is the number of tests that I need to do. And it's also got an item sampling down here, and this is the quantity that I need to do, which is all created on a quality order. Quality order looks like. So the quality order gets created, it has its own number, it refers to a reference number, it's either a purchase order. If it was a batch controlled item, I can also refer it directly to the batch. So this particular test has a coil test and a cone weight test that it has to do. When you go and hit the test, the results, it opens up a form where you've actually got to enter the results, and you could do this blind, so you could not show what it should be, what the tolerance should be. So they enter the result and it will give you a pass or fail. Discrete manufacturing distribution. Okay, so we've got commodity prices, warranties, hazardous, regulated products, and MSD, safety data sheets. Commodity prices, I can actually create a commodity-based price structure. And when I go and do my trade agreement, I can actually then go down here, and as you can see, this here is P7000, which is an orange. And what I could do over here is I can put in a price quantity and a cost multiplier and the margin and percentage. So it'll actually start calculating what that margin should be. So when my commodity prices change, all I need to do is to change the price on the commodity, and it automatically updates the pricing structures for me. More along stainless, quite a few people who are dealing with steel have that type of environment. More and more people these days are trying to negotiate a fixed price for a certain time. That's where purchase agreements come in, where we can actually set up a quantity-based pricing structure as well. Okay, now another new thing that's been introduced is warranty. So we now have a new item type, which is warranty. So effectively, you can actually create this warranty item type, and down here, it will actually give you what that actually applies to, and then you associate products to that warranty structure. So when you go and sell a product, it automatically will pick up the warranties for you. Product compliance. Product compliance, we've got regulated products, reporting products, and restricted products. So if we look at this one here, for instance, I can actually see that this particular product here is an acoustic, and it requires some sort of product compliance on it. And so you got to there and you actually go and set the compliance, whatever it may be. Then you've got the hazardous materials. So hazardous materials will pick up the regulation code that you require in a whole lot of different countries. When you're doing a sales order, it will also look at the shipping carrier, carrier services, motor delivery, and shipping lines. It will then give us a report based on those two sets. And as you can see, there's a fair bit that you need to set up for the hazardous materials, but once you go and done it, it now makes you completely compliant. Restricted and regulated products again. So this is where your restricted products are gone and done. So you go and set up your restricted company, why it's restricted, whether it's inclusive or exclusive. When you go and create a sales order, so when I go and create a sales order here and I try and sell somebody a restricted product, it will actually give me this warning. This is restricted to sell, and tell me that the delivery address, you can't actually sell this product to that particular delivery address. So you either need to change the product or the delivery address. Okay, then you've got material reporting, where you can actually go and set up, and you can tick a box here where it needs to be reported or not, and then you can run reports of regulated products that you sold. A good one for that is pseudoephedrine. Anyone that sells pseudoephedrine, it doesn't matter how much they sell or how much they move, they've got to report that they've sold it to somebody. Then There's your safety data sheets. So you go and create your safety data sheets. Now up here, there's a bit of setup that you actually do to meet all the compliances, but effectively when you create a picking list and you've got this little data sheet sitting there, it will now tell you need to go ahead and create that safety data sheet. And that's just a matter of hitting a single button, which will then automatically print out a safety data sheet for you. Model reporting. Okay, so we inside the system, we have a whole lot of pre-built embedded BI reports. So the old days we used to run one of those old-fashioned reports, try and drop it into Excel and then put a pivot table over it to give you reports. You can actually build the whole lot inside of D365. Now they're not just pretty pictures. You can actually click onto any one of these and it will drill down to the tables below. And as you can see there, for production performance, I've got a whole lot sitting there, and I've got a whole lot more in a different one as well, including managing your variances. So that's usually quite a big one in production. I want to know what my variance was to standard. Then we've got purchasing, where you could start looking at the spend analysis. You've got these KPIs across the top here, so you at a very quick look, you can see exactly how you're going. And then you can actually break down your total spend. And if I go and clicked into one of those segments in the system, it would actually drill into the table below that holds all that information. Okay, we've got cost analysis where we're monitoring inventory turns. We've also got inventory counting, manufacturing counting, and standard cost variance analysis as well, as you can see. And this one here is an example of what your standard cost variance looks like, where it does actually show you the individual ones, your top 10 offenders, and you can change that to be the top 20 if you wanted to. Sales profitability, performance. There again, these are all completely embedded, run their own cubes. You don't have to do anything except for refresh the cubes to get all this stuff running. It takes all your current data, so it's near live, as much live as your information is. Okay, and then of course you got the financial insights, which kind of excite the financial people. Across the bottom here, we've got sub-ledger insights, trial balances, balance sheets. There's a whole lot right the way down the bottom there. So I've only shown a couple of shots there. Okay, and so that's it from me. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's now going to pick up the production part of the scanning.
Thanks, Paul. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen. And can I get a confirmation that you can see that?
We've got it here, mate, just sending live. Good to go.
Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome. What I'm going to do now is just cover off on advanced warehouse and raw material picking and how it works in Dynamics. And I'm just going to go through a few slides, and then I'm going to go into an actual demo of the process. I'm also going to do a very brief touch on Power Apps and how Power Apps can be embedded into Dynamics. So we'll just start through the slides. Okay, so obviously we sell a product, we plan it, we reserve it, then we pick it, process it, and do the report as finished. So that's the circle that we're going to cover off. We're not going to do the sell and plan, but we're going to do the reserve, pick, and process and finish part. So here's a brief slide on, and what I'm going to show you here is Dynamics has introduced some new functionality in around scheduling, which is what Paul was talking about earlier. We can now create a production order, and we can create a schedule, and Dynamics will not pick the or release the orders to create work for picking until the actual schedule reaches the time that is required. So that way you're not actually picking a whole lot of material and sitting at a resource waiting for the production order to consume it. You can actually pick it as and when it's required. So that's a new functionality, and it's all done based on the scheduling, which I'll show you where the scheduling is, and I'll show you how that works. But we're just going to do a manual release today in our demo. We're also going to show you the mobile device and the mobile device screens. And what I've done in this particular demo is I've separated the work up into bulk pick work, drum work, bags, and then just normal dispensary pick work. And I've created groups to display the open work that's there, and I'll be demonstrating that process as we go through. We're also then going to go and on the mobile device actually start a production order, and have it run. And then we're also going, once it's started, we're then going to go and do a report as finished. So I'll demonstrate that. We're going to also print out a SEC label, which is a you know, like a license plate label or SEC. And then we're also going to do a I'll show you the quantity and the put away material. So, and then this is Power App. So what I've done here is actually I've created a small Power App that is looking at the production control, and I'm going to demonstrate how it can be a web browser Power App. You can see the pictures there where I've put it into an actual mobile device, an iPad, so you can actually view the controls from the iPad. And then I've also embedded it into Dynamics. So I'm going to show you that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get straight into the demo now, and I will just close this part. And I have to start a new session because it timed out. So here we are in our Dynamics environment. And what I'm going to do is go to a production order. And I've got some production orders here that I've already created, but this particular one here, I'm going to show you, I've created a Gantt chart, and I've got a schedule in there. And once I expand these two, you will see there that I've got two operations, an operation 10 and operation 20. And this operation here, when it finishes, it will actually release the work prior to, I can actually set up the schedule to go and release the work to create the pick work, to then put it at the resource ready for the next operation to start, rather than at the very start, which in a lot of cases you would release all the work and it would then create all this pick work and have to be picked. This will actually release it based on the time frame, on the time fence. So, and now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to a production order, and I'm going to show you a production order where this particular one here, we're going to go into it. And this is going to, we're only creating 50 units, but I'm going to quickly show you the formula just so that you can see the products that I'm looking at. So I've got these products: applesauce, flour, sugar, and cheese. And now what I'm going to do is go back and actually release it to create work. So I'm going to release it here. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is I'm doing this manually, but you can now run it through a batch that will look at the Gantt chart, at the schedule, and to decide when it's going to be released. So you can see that that has now released it, and I will now go in here and I'll be able to see the work that it's created in a second or two. So it runs on a batch process to create the work. So this is here just is submitted to wait for it to run. So always the way, isn't it? It takes a minute when you're demoing it. So I've actually got one that I've already released, but there you can see. So there, what it's done is it's created the work, and you can see there that it's created bulk work where it's saying to go and pick a pallet. So there's a pallet of applesauce, a pallet of sugar, a pallet flour, and a pallet of sugar. And then I've got a drum of sauce. So my units of measure is made up of, I think it was like 50 drums makes a pallet, and one drum, you know, so it's separated the work up into different sizes. And then we've got bags of sugar, flour. So we needed a pallet plus 5 bags, and we need a pallet plus 2 bags of sugar. And then the final thing is we need 750 grams of kilos of cheese. So it's actually created the work, and it's told me where to go and pick it, where to stage it. So I have a staging location, and then I also have a final resource where it's actually going to be consumed on the production line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to start up the mobile device, which you can see here. And I've separated the mobile device. I've created what we call work display, so it actually shows the open work. So if I click in here, this will actually show all the open work required for picking for the bulk area, so that you can separate up. The beauty about Dynamics and advanced warehousing is I can create this work display pretty much. It's limitless what I can do with it. So here I've separated into drum work, and then I've got the bag work. So these are all the pick work for bags. And then I've got the standard ingredients room production work. Now, what I'm going to do is I've got one here that we're going to go and pick. And it is bag work. And this one, so I'm going to pick this one here. And I'm just going to, I put in my license plate or my SEC number that's on the product. Pick it. So you can see there 10 bags equals 250 kilos. That's my target license plate. So the product is actually going to be picked and put onto that license plate. So that's picking the goods. Okay, and now I go okay here, and it's going to move it to that stage location. Now, at the same time, what's just happened here is I've actually just had it print out a label that has got the target license plate on it, and it has now got the quantity that was picked. So this label will go onto that material that's now sitting in the staging location, so that the next person that comes along and has to move it to the final resource can just scan the LP and actually do the move very easily, rather than having to go back and try and find it. It's going to have a label that he can stick on it. So now what I'm going to do is we've picked our goods. I'm now going to so we can start our production order here by just putting in the production order number. And once I enter in that production order, it will then start the production order. Now, I'll just quickly do that. I'll just go back here. And here, I want to start this one. Okay, that's my units, 50 units. Okay, so that production order is now started. And if I go back here and I refresh that screen, it will now show that it has started. So I can now, from the mobile device, go and produce my first report is finished on that production order. So I can go back into the production order here now. And now what it does is I've got it, the default unit measure for this product is normally 1 pallet, but I'm actually going to change it and make it so that I'm only reporting as finished, say 10 cartons. And I'll edit that and say 10. Okay, so that's my LP, my license plate or SEC number, and I'm reporting as finished. And okay, so we'll just go back and just change that to 1. And you'll see over here on the label, and here comes my SEC label that comes out as I report it as finished. So now what I'm going to show you is I'm going to just quickly show you the Power BI side of it. So here I have my production order, and what I've done is production orders, I've embedded a Power BI app in here that I created, and I've just called it Production Control. It's a very simple one, but it's essentially looking at the Dynamics production system. And it's right now what it's doing is it's just loading the data. And here you can see it's got my production orders. So there's my latest one that I just did. And you can see that it's now got a started status. This one's got a started status. This one's got a created status and the quantities. And I can actually, I've added an extra field where I can go in and look at the work that's created for it. So I've now this Power App is embedded, but it is also available if I just go and have a look at the actual screen here. I've got a full screen that I've loaded up. I can load this up on any device, and once again I can look at this Power App. And you can see here I've scheduled, oh, this one here is not refreshed, so I'm going to refresh it. And it will show that it's now started. So it started, created, and so on. And I'm just going to quickly show, so here's where I created the app in Microsoft Power Apps. So I created my screens, my display, I embedded the data tables with it. And that's how I built it. And then what I've done is I embedded it back into here. So your Power Apps, you can actually do a lot with it. What I've done is a very simple implementation of it, but you can actually even create it where it will write back to Dynamics and update Dynamics records. And the last thing I want to show you is on that one that we started and we reported as finished, I'm just going to go in and show you where it's created the work. And you can see here, here's the work here, the put away work. And you can see here, it's got finished goods is where we're picking it up from. And then we're going to put it anywhere in the warehouse that we can fit this product. So you can see here, there's my target license plate and there's my process. So that's it from me, Paul, and that's just on Advanced Warehouse. So thank you, and back to you, Paul.
Thanks for that, Tom. I think now we're going into, we've left it, last time we got caught a bit short with the question and answers. I think we go into the question and answers now, Gareth.
Sounds good there, mate. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through. Let me just adjust this. Beautiful. So the first one for you there, Paul, can you configure product scrap into the product? It might be a consistent scrap or a variable scrap where something went wrong and the whole run has to be scrapped.
Yes, you can. In the actual bill of
So sorry, you
itself,
just froze there, Paul, after you said yes, we can.
Sorry. Okay, is that better?
Better.
Okay, then. So yes, you can. So in an actual bill of materials itself, you have actually got the ability to build in consistent scrap or variable scrap, and that's on a per line basis. You could also build it in against the product. So say for packaging, you may always have a 2% factor. Instead of loading it in every single item that you load into a bill of materials, you can actually set it at the item level and it will default through to the bill of materials.
Second question for you there, Paul. Can you include quality checks when using the shop floor device? For example, you cannot proceed to the next operation unless a component item number is scanned by the operator and confirmed against the required item number.
Yes, you can, but your quality order itself, what it will do is it'll be looking at the status of the quality order. So if it's still in progress, we can actually restrict it so you cannot actually use that item until it's actually passed that quality order. And we do that by an inventory status if it's non-batch controlled, or we use a disposition code if it's a batch controlled item. And what they effectively do is it will block you from issuing it. You can still reserve against that product, so you know that's the one you need to use, but until it passes its test, you won't be able to actually scan it into the pick list. When you try and scan it, it will tell you the inventory status is not applicable.
Thanks, Paul. I've just got one final question for Tom here. If you do have any other questions, you can quickly pop them in the chat there. But Tom, what level of skill, I guess, is required to customize or build some of these Power Apps? And second part, do we at Fusion 5 offer any training on this?
Okay, well, look, to be honest with you, the Power Apps, for the first time, I looked at it yesterday. And I created what I did. It's Microsoft have made Power Apps what they call no code required development. So if you have a bit of an understanding of how the F&O tables work and how the views work, it's not hard. It is not hard to do it. As far as Fusion 5 offering training, I do believe that we have some certified people on Power Apps within the organisation that can obviously support this. So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just add to that as well. It's Craig here. Yeah, we've also had people doing quite a bit of different work in the area. Like we've developed some apps that we are looking at going to market next year as well with. So as in a bit more formally, like things that we've spent a bit more time doing. So yeah, happy to introduce you to the right people for that as well.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, so we've got no more questions that have come through, so I might wrap it up there and give you a bit of time back. I actually do want to thank Paul and Tom for presenting. I know you both put some work in over the past few weeks and it shows to get this ready, so thank you. And of course, special thanks to all of our attendees for joining us this morning. I'll be sharing a link to the recording of the event as well as a summary of answers for the questions that have been asked today. However, if you do have any further questions or even want to arrange an in-person demo, just feel free to reach out to any of the presenters directly today or your account manager. Other than that, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week there. Cheers.
Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you.